But anyways, welcome to the very end of our series, Painkillers. It's been a great, great month as we've talked about, really, it's been a very deep month and very emotional month as we've talked about pain. And we've talked about the three areas that we all experience pain. The first week we talked about the pain of loss. And we looked at how God is comfort. And we talked about how God comforts. And part two, we talked about the pain of suffering. How all of us go through suffering, some more intensely than others. But we talked about how God is strength. And we talked about the importance of worship. Last week, Pastor Evan, where's Pastor Evan at? He's somewhere around here. There he is. He talked about the pain of change. Oh, how we don't want to change. And he had three great questions that he brought to us. And we talked about how no pain and no gain. And this morning, we're talking about Scream for the very last part of our Painkillers series. Now, how many of you guys like movies? Raise your hand if you like movies. Raise your hand. All right, you can go ahead and shout it out. If, from your perspective, what is the all-time best Scream from any movie?
Night of the Living Dead.
Night of the Living Dead? All right. What'd you say? Home Alone? All right, what else? What else? Come on, give me some famous Screams. Psycho.
Michael Myers.
Michael Myers. Okay, well... Freddy Krueger. There you go. Well, just have a little fun this morning. We put a little montage. Actually, Chris, who does a great job, put a little montage of some famous Screams. And so, why don't you go ahead and check out this clip. All right, Scream, yes. Now, if you think about it for a minute, you got to ask yourself the question: why do we scream? Okay, why? What are some things and reasons why we scream? Well, we scream for several reasons. Number one, I thought of as we scream because of fear. Because we're afraid, and that has always been, I think, a part of humankind. Because even if you look in the Bible, in the New Testament, when Jesus is walking on water in Matthew chapter 14, his disciples scream like a bunch of schoolgirls. I mean, they were like, "Oh, it's a ghost!" And Jesus is like, "Hey, relax, okay, it's just me." And so we scream because we're afraid, right? I remember when I was a youth pastor in Canton, Ohio, the custodian and I had these scare wars that we had. Because we were last to leave the building on a Wednesday night, and so we would just always see how if we could one-up each other and scare the living daylights out of each other. Like I would know when he would go to his custodial closet, and I would stand there like this and wait. The door would open. I'd be like, "Ah!" And he'd pee his pants, and then he's like, "Okay, I got you next time." Well, one day it was pitch black, all the lights were off. I was walking because we lived in a parsonage right by that church. And so I was walking down the long hallway to go to my house, and all of a sudden as I'm walking, I hear this, that's kind of a weird noise, and all of a sudden, bam, I feel something in my neck. I was like, "Ah!" And I fell on the ground, and all of a sudden the lights come on, and there he was, laughing and staring at me. I looked, and there was a little marshmallow. And I was like, he had a little marshmallow gun, and he got me. I was like, "Oh, dude, he won that one. I don't think I ever topped that one." But we scream because we're afraid. Another thing I thought of is sometimes we scream when we're in pain. I don't know if you ever heard someone scream in pain, but I know parents, especially or grandparents, there's nothing that will make your heart stop faster than when you're inside and all of a sudden you hear a blood-curdling scream coming from the outside. I don't know if any of your parents have experienced that before. Yeah, I remember when I was growing up, now I love my brother, gave him the benefit of the doubt, so I know it was an accident. I know he would never do this on purpose. I know he would never do this, but we were in the driveway, and those gates that close, the fence gates that have little posts that was keeping in place? Well, he was spinning around one day out in the driveway, and all of a sudden, whack! He hit me right here above the face, and all of a sudden, blood started coming down. I started screaming, and I can imagine what my mom felt when she heard the cry from the inside. So we scream because we're afraid. We scream when we're in pain, but I also thought that we often scream when we're in desperate need of something, or we desperately want something, we also scream. Well, there's two forms of this. And one, there's a shallow form of this. There's those who scream for Justin Bieber, that kind of thing. Or remember Michael Jackson? Yeah, people passing out. You're like, what in the world? There's that kind of shallow scream. But then there's people, scream because they're in desperate need of something. I'm going to show you a little bit longer, short movie here. It's about 6 minutes long, but this is going to help us set the stage for Scream this morning as we look at a lot of times some of the desperate screams that we have, maybe in our hearts, but we don't let them out. I want you to check this out. A third reason why. A third reason why we scream is because we have a desperation for something, a quiet desperation. And most people in life you will never know are screaming on the inside. I really believe that this mask, which is so famous because of the movie and now for Halloween, is a great picture of how many of us feel on the inside. If people could just get a glimpse into our hearts, they would see this picture of someone crying out, living a life of quiet desperation. A life where they're plowing through, trying to just make it through. There we go. I thought about how many times as Christians and Americans, we think, we'll just keep going, we put on our plastic smiles, and we'll pretend that everything's okay. So that's what we're supposed to do, right? And yet, inside we're screaming, and we actually wish somebody could get a glimpse into our souls. We wish somebody could see what we really feel. We wish somebody could see and hear what we really want to say on the inside. But yet, we feel like nobody understands. There's single parents that are screaming on the inside for strength, for support, for grace, and for hope. I know so many married couples that they may smile in public, but they're screaming on the inside, wishing all the fighting and the nagging and all the quarreling would just stop, constantly feeling like a failure. I thought about how many people are screaming on the inside because they're bored with life, and they're thinking, is this really all that life has to offer? And even though you may not know it because they're smelling on the inside and they're pretending, they got this scream mask of the soul crying out for someone to bring something different. I thought about how many people, work so hard and long hours, and yet often, if you really evaluate it, it seems like we're on a hamster wheel and we're not making any progress. It's like, wow. So as we scream and talk about scream this morning, we wonder and wish there's a whole lot more going on in life, and there is a whole lot more people screaming than we realize. That coworker next to you, that friend, the people that we think have everything all together on the inside, quietly living a life of desperation. I thought about, what happens if the people begin to cry out and scream? I wonder how many more people we would see if we actually heard them scream. Only if we could cry out and scream to somebody and to someone who could change things.
I can't take this anymore!
What would happen if we began to actually cry out? What would change? Mark chapter 10. Mark is the second book of the New Testament. In Mark chapter 10, we're going to read a story about a guy that I believe you and I can relate to. This guy was called Blind Bartimaeus. And this guy lived in pain. He was blind. He knew what it was like to be rejected. He knew what it was like to depend on others for support. And blind Bartimaeus had something happen in his life one day. Every week at Wanda Family Church, we have a slogan we repeat. It's different depending on the message. And today's slogan, we're going to repeat. Everyone say, the one scream that changes everything. The one scream that changes everything. Mark chapter 10, you can follow along on the screens. It says this, verse 46. They reached Jericho, and Jesus and his disciples left town. A large crowd followed him. A blind beggar named Bartimaeus, son of Timaeus, was sitting beside the road. See, I want to pause here. Keep the verse on the screen. I want to pause here because here we're introduced to Bartimaeus the beggar. And this is what he's known for. I mean, this is what his reputation is. He's blind Bartimaeus. He's the beggar. He's the man who sits on the side of the road. This is what he's always done, and he's developed a reputation. And so here he is in his pain. Everyone knows his pain. Everyone knows about him. He's well known in the area because this road, if you study a little bit, was a very well-traveled road for the Jews because it was on the way to Jerusalem where they had a lot of their famous feasts. A lot of their feasts that God asked them to have. And so as they would go on the road, a lot of people passed blind Bartimaeus. A lot of people knew who he was. And I thought about that. Here, Bartimaeus is sitting on the side of the road blind and in pain. And he may not be screaming outside, but he's screaming on the inside. And if you got a glimpse of Bartimaeus' heart, you probably would see this. And I wondered, how many people walked into the gathering this morning on the inside looking like this? Sitting on the side of the road in their pain. You know what? And here's the hard part about blind Bartimaeus is other people were laughing and walking and seeing as they passed by him. And there he was, stuck in his pain. I wonder how many this morning walked in here with pain on the inside. And here's something interesting, is that video we showed of the girl, is there's a lot of people, when they have pain or they're going through something, they carry it for such a long time, they become comfortable with it. You know what I'm talking about? To where the very thing that is keeping them in their chains, they don't want to let go of, because it's actually become their friend. And so blind Bartimaeus has been accustomed to this for a very long time. But we keep reading in verse 47. It says this: when Bartimaeus heard that Jesus of Nazareth was nearby, he began to shout, "Jesus, Son of David, have mercy on me." Oh, I love that verse. Everyone say the one scream that changes everything. See, this one verse is pretty significant because he's on the side of the road like he always is, and he hears the crowds talking about Jesus, and he screams.
Stop! It's just too much!
And just like that, blind Bartimaeus would scream out. He cried out, "Jesus, Son of David, have mercy on me." And I love that verse because Bartimaeus had a moment where he decided, I'm not going to stay quiet any longer. I'm not going to hold on to my pain any longer. I'm not going to stuff and pretend like everything is okay and just get by any longer. And he began to cry out, the one scream that changes everything. And crying out to Jesus at that moment was pretty significant for two reasons. Number one, when he cried out to Jesus, he was acknowledging that he was in desperate need of help. He was in a desperate state. He was in a misery state. He was in an unworthy state. He was in a helpless state because he depended on other people. So his cry for Jesus was a declaration that he needed help. And number two, something that's pretty significant if you study the passage in the Bible, is that he, by saying the Son of David, that was a messianic title of Old Testament prophecy. So by him saying, Jesus, Son of David, he was saying, I believe that you are the Son of God. I believe that you can change my life. And here's another cool thing if you study Old Testament prophecy, is the Jews believed that the Messiah would be able to open up blind eyes. And so you can write this down. That's found in Isaiah 35 and Matthew 11, where the two prophecies about the Messiah. So when he said, Jesus, Son of David, he was saying, I believe you are the Son of God. And I believe you can heal my eyes. Jesus, I've been in this situation for a long time, but I'm going to scream out to you. Everyone say the one scream that changes everything. Verse 48 says this. The people next to him, it says, be quiet. Many of the people yelled at him. But he only shouted louder, Son of David, have mercy on me.
Somebody help me!
Son of David, have mercy on me. I love that because the crowd, if you notice, began to, whenever he shouted out, they began to try to hush him. They began to try to silence him. They began to say, you know what, shh. And this is kind of true today. It's like people, will say, how's it going? And you start to open up. They go, whoa, whoa, hey, I don't want to know that. I just want you to say good day so I can be about my business. All right? And just smile and nod your head. And that's kind of how it is. People don't want you to kind of open up and shout out. People don't want you to. But yeah, I love it because they're trying to tell him to be quiet. But then all of a sudden, when they did that, he shouted louder. Because he understood how desperate he was, and Jesus was passing by, and he didn't know how many more opportunities he's going to have. And so he began to shout even louder, Jesus, Son of David, have mercy on me. Verse 49. It says, when Jesus heard him, he stopped and said, tell him to come here. So they called the blind man. Cheer up, they said. Come on, he's calling you. Bartimaeus threw aside his coat, jumped up, and he came to Jesus. I love this whole story of what took place in that day, because when he cried out to Jesus, Jesus stopped. You know, Jesus was on his way, he was doing something, but every time you and I cry out to Jesus, he will always stop and he will always respond. Let me say it one more time. Every time we cry out to Jesus, he will always stop and he will always respond. No matter how crazy your life is, when we call out to Jesus, he listens and he hears. And I love Bartimaeus' response, because when Jesus said, come here, he threw off his cloak and he jumped up and he had people help him, and he went immediately to Jesus. He didn't waste any moment. He didn't take any time. He ran towards him. Wow, that's so powerful. So no matter what you're going through right now, no matter what you're facing, I want to challenge you. Cry out to Jesus and he will respond. Like Bartimaeus, we don't have to live lives of quiet desperation any longer. We don't have to stay silent anymore.
Does anybody notice my pain? Ugh.
Verse 51 says this. What do you want me to do for you? Jesus asked. My rabbi, the blind man said, I want to see. And I don't know if you ever read a part of the Bible and you just have different questions and you wonder things. And I read that and you thought, isn't that kind of a funny question? Like, why would Jesus ask a blind guy who's screaming, Son of David, have mercy on me? You're going, hey, what can I do for you? It's like, Jesus knew he was blind. Jesus knew he couldn't see. So the question is, why would he ask him that question? Well, because, going back to that girl in the video, there's so many people that are comfortable in their pain, in their chains, in their sin. There's so many people that they kind of develop a habit of the pain, their chains, or their bondage, or their sin, and they don't really want to be better. And so Jesus was asking him, what do you want? Because he's saying, hey, what is it that you want me to do? And I love Bartimaeus. He says, you're right, I want to see. I know what I want to do. I don't want to stay in my situation any longer. I'm calling out to you because I know that you are the Son of God. I know you can open up blind eyes, and I want to see. Everyone said the one scream that changes everything. So what does Jesus do? Verse 52. And Jesus said to him, go, for your faith has healed you. Instantly the man could see, and he followed Jesus down the road. For the first time in Bartimaeus' life, he could see. I can imagine he's probably dancing down the road. I will show you a dance right now, other than I can't dance. So, he was dancing down the road, seeing, probably, imagine, we've seen beautiful sunsets and birds chirping and trees, whatever it is, and all for the first time, Jesus said, I see your faith in me. I've heard your cries, and he reached out and he healed blind Bartimaeus. But wow, how powerful. If we could look inside of you this morning, what kind of heart will we see? What kind of soul? Have you been leading a life of quiet desperation, crying out, wishing that somebody could just hear you, somebody could see you, somebody could come? And you look at, some of us carry anxiety, the pain of divorce, homelessness, depression, and the list goes on and on. Things that we carry with us, but we pack away because that's what good Americans, hardworking Americans do. But there's one scream that changes everything. The one scream that changes everything is simply a scream out to Jesus. And the reason why that scream changes everything is because his one scream changed everything. The very end of his life on the cross in Luke 19:30, it says this. When Jesus had tasted it, he said, it is finished. Then he bowed his head and he released his spirit. See, he said, it is finished. So Jesus' last scream changed everything. So now our one scream to him changes everything. See, in the Old Testament, there was established a sacrifice system. And the way that God set it up is that once Adam and Eve had sinned, there had to be a shedding of blood for forgiveness of sins. And so if you read the Old Testament, you see constantly the Israelites killing lamb or goats, or there was cattle or different things, and they were sacrificing for the forgiveness of sins. But God sent His Son Jesus to walk this earth and to be the sacrifice once and for all for our forgiveness and our freedom from our sin. He walked this earth and He took our sin, our shame, our pain, all the things that are inside of us that cause us to scream out. He took on the cross. And at the last minute, He screamed, "It is finished." I want you to check out this one last video. One scream that changes everything. Because of Jesus' last words, "It is finished," we don't have to carry the weight of our sin, the pain, and all the things that cause us to look like this on the outside. All the things that really show who we really are, screaming out for someone to change things. And the one cry, the one scream that changes anything is a cry to Jesus. If you can bow your heads and close your eyes up here and come back up for some more. As we close this gathering, we don't have to live lives of quiet desperation any longer. We don't have to hold inside the things that are destroying us. The things that maybe because of fear or insecurity we hold on to. Because we don't want other people to see it, or we don't want other people to hear us, we don't want other people to know, but yet we're holding on to it. We don't have to hold on to those any longer. We don't have to hold on to the pain, the fear, the doubt, the anger, the worry, the stress, the sin. We can scream out to Jesus, and today, I can promise you one thing, and this rest of your life, is every time you scream out to Him, He will respond. He will call back to you and say, "What do you want me to do?" It's like blind Bartimaeus, we will have an opportunity to say, "Jesus, I need you to forgive me." Or, "Jesus, I need you to set me free." Or, "Jesus, I need you to heal me." Or, "Jesus, I need you to restore me." Or, "I need you to redeem me," whatever it may be. And may we be a church and a people that never stop screaming out to Jesus. With heads bowed and eyes still closed. If you're here and you say, "Jeremy, I've never, ever have truly surrendered my life over to Jesus Christ," that's the very first scream that would be worth anything you could ever do in this world. And maybe you've been religious, maybe you've heard about God, maybe you know about Him intellectually, but you say, "You know what, I think I'm ready to surrender control of my life over to Him, and put my faith and trust in Him," and like Bartimaeus, to make a declaration that, "Jesus, you are the Son of God, and you did die for my sin, and I need you to come in." And here's the beautiful thing about salvation. When you cross the line of relationship with Jesus Christ, it's not, I want to read this quote to you, it's not about behavior modification. Christianity, serving God, is not about behavior modification. It's about heart transformation. And the only one who can change your heart is not doing good deeds or not working harder, is surrendering your heart to Jesus Christ. And if you'd like to do that this morning, I'm going to pray. And instead of living a life of quiet desperation, in your seat, quietly as I pray, call out to God in your heart and say, "God, as Pastor Jeremy is praying this prayer, I'm ready. I mean those words. I'm ready to surrender and put my faith and trust in you." And God, who hears your heart, will respond instantly. Let's pray. Father God, I thank you that you sent your Son Jesus 2,000 years ago to walk on this earth, to experience everything that I do. Yet you didn't sin. And yet you took my sin and my shame and my guilt and all my junk on the cross. And yet you didn't just die, but you rose again on the third day and you are alive. And I know that you created me to have a relationship with you. And so I'm tired, God, of just trying to live life on my own. I'm tired of trying to make sense on my own. I'm trying to play the role of you. I surrender control and I scream out to you that you are God. And I just ask you to come into my heart. Teach me what it means to follow you. Teach me what it means to serve you and to spend my life on this journey of being a Christ follower, I pray. In Jesus' name. With heads bowed and eyes so closed, we have some cool resources that we like to give people out in the lobby. And so if you prayed that prayer with me, with no one looking around, I just want you to quickly raise your hand and get my attention. Say, yeah, Jeremy, I prayed that prayer for the first time, because we would love to pray with you later on this week, as well as give you some cool resources that will help you on your journey of being a Christ follower. So if there's anybody here this morning say, yeah, I prayed that prayer for the first time, just raise your hand really quick.
You know what?
See anybody else? Awesome. For the rest of us, what we're going to do this morning is we're going to have the prayer team come back to my right, your left, and we're just going to sing the first verse of Amazing Grace, Then My Chains Are Gone. And if you have a prayer of anything, don't walk out with it. Don't hold on to it. But no, we're not going to be screaming at the top of our lungs. But you can come over here and scream out to God by just simply acknowledging your desperate need for Him and allow Him to pray for you. So, directing here as we sing.